Welcome to 22-1 for PhDs with Ashley and Dave, where we spend 20 minutes discussing two perspectives on building a successful industry career and leave you with one actionable step to help you start preparing today. Today, we are talking about the ever-present conflict between certainty and speed.
Dave, I'm gonna be honest. I'm a bit nervous for this episode. I think this is a tough one for me to wrap my head around, and I imagine it's the same for a lot of PhDs.
Yes, it's a big one because the contrast, of course, is as I say in academic research, it's important to be certain. We're going to be publishing our results. Nobody wants to publish something that is wrong. We take whatever time it takes to be certain about something before we publish it. But in industry, I like to say if your company is doing anything valuable, you will have competition, right? Somebody else will be trying to solve the same problem, and you will have customers that want whatever you have yesterday, usually.
Hmm.
And at whatever stage of, I say, product development, even if you're in an R&D lab, even if you're quite ways from the product itself going out the door, everything that's done ultimately aims towards that, and speed is important. But it is a challenge for a lot of PhDs.
Yeah, absolutely. There have been so many instances in my own academic journey where I've been told not to move forward or not to make a claim if I'm not absolutely certain, and to sort of be careful how I communicate something if I don't have that certainty or if I don't have full confidence. And so I could see this being something sort of ingrained in PhDs in the academic space and pretty crucial to sort of work on that habit before transitioning to industry.
Yes, and in fact, so I talk about stereotypes. There are stereotypes of PhDs in industry. We've talked about it already in this series. This is one of them. And the way it usually sounds, I've heard it a lot. In fact, I can't tell you how many industry managers have said, I can't get the PhDs to make a decision. They always want more data. They always want, I ask them for their recommendation for the best path forward. Let's say there are three different approaches we could take for this product. We're at the early stage, and I've given them 3 weeks to analyze them, or even 6 weeks, and give me the recommendation. They don't want to decide because they don't know for sure. And they need, well, how much time do you need? Another day? No, I need maybe 6 months to know for sure. Well, we don't have that kind of time. I need you to decide. So that is, it's a stereotype, like so many stereotypes. There's some basis in fact, and that is the element of it here, that we are trained not to speak up until we are sure, and that's where that comes from. So it can be
Absolutely.
challenging.
Absolutely. So you mentioned some of the drivers for the need for speed being competition, customers wanting your product yesterday, which we don't really have customers in academia, but we might
Right.
have competition in academia. There are people that get scooped all the time, right? And so I could see speed being something that doesn't necessarily, like, that's not necessarily harmful for an academic setting. But I could also see certainty being something that's beneficial for an industry setting, right? If you have a customer that wants something that works really, really well and they want it now, but also they want it to work,
hmm
certainty could help with that. And so, how do people in industry think of certainty as a way for producing a product that is the best that it possibly can be? Because if you're not certain, it's risky, right, to move forward? How does that work?
Well, so certainty is important. As you pointed out, if this ultimately goes to a customer, well, they need it to work the way they need it to work. Now, what we don't usually do in industry is to make it the best it possibly could be, right? That gets
Mm.
into the PhD stereotype again. Another thing I hear is, well, the PhDs always want to continue improving it because it can always be better. Yes, it can always be better. What you need to do in any kind of a product or service oriented situation is, usually we use the term specifications, and that's broadly speaking. It talks about the performance, it talks about the reliability, and of course, this will be different if you're talking about physical products versus something in the life sciences or a drug or something. But in the end, you have to start out by clearly defining what do we need this to do, and that becomes your target. And the idea then is to hit that target and make sure you were certain about those things, the things that matter, but then get there as quickly as you can. So it's always a balancing act. We have to get there as fast as we can. If we take all the time in the world to make it perfect, somebody else will have scooped us. Somebody else will
Gotcha.
have their product to market first, or the customer will have moved on. So it really is a balancing act. And of course, that gets back to the it's a game, not a formula. There's no right way to do this. There is risk involved in it. There are decisions that don't have any right answers, and that is what makes it challenging.
I think that risk can be quite uncomfy. I know personally, certainty, I mean, as certain as we can be, is something that allows us to sort of move forward with a little bit less discomfort, right? It's like I feel very certain in what's going on, or I've seen the data, I've done all the controls. This is the next right step, or this is the claim I can make. And
Mhm.
so that uncomfiness, that discomfort seems like something worth working through if you're going to sort of get from certainty to a more speed focus in industry.
Yes, that the discomfort, it doesn't mean something is wrong, right? Now, obviously, you can take too many risks, you can be too careless, and that's not what we want. But almost certainly there will be some discomfort in doing it the right way or a good way, because you will feel that feeling of, oh, I don't know and I don't want to move forward until I do know. That's just something you have to work with, and getting used to that discomfort is a natural part of it. Learning to move forward when you don't know for sure. Because most things, you say, well, what if I make the wrong decision? Well, generally, you don't know the right decision now, and there probably is no right decision. When you're creating solutions, there are often multiple ways that it can work. But what you do want to do is say, okay, if I don't know for sure and we pick this approach and we start moving forward, what can we do to monitor whether or not this is going to work and find out as quickly as possible so that if we have to make an adjustment, we don't lose too much time. It's always a risk. You may get down the road and find the path you chose doesn't work, but that is the game.
Okay. So we're in a hurry in industry. Maybe not a hurry, but we're trying to go more quickly. But you said something like you could have a delay on the back end. So just because you take a risk and you make a decision with speed doesn't mean that that's the right decision. And so let's say on the back end you have a 6 month delay, you got to go backwards and you need to, reconfigure some things and move forward.
Mhm.
Why not just take that 6 months upfront to become more certain, and then you don't have to waste it on the back end?
That sounds so obvious, right? It sounds like that would be the way to work. Well, two reasons. One is that usually the delay you would take up front to be certain of your decision usually will take more than what it takes to correct it in the back end. Now, that's certainly not always true. But the other issue is it's easy to talk about one particular decision, but usually there will be many decisions. And if you were to take that delay up front on all those decisions, the delays all concatenate and you end up much later. What's important here is building a habit. It's a mindset shift, like so much we talk about, right? Building the habit of deciding quickly when you don't know for sure saves you lots of time up front. And there's just a risk. It may all work out well. And as you get better at it, and if you try and make well informed decisions, it may be that there's no delay and then you clearly win. But maybe one of the many decisions does run into a problem and you take a delay somewhere further down the path. That's still better than taking that big delay at the front. It feels uncomfortable. It's not what we're
Sure.
used to, but that's the way the game is played.
Sure. And I can imagine, if you sort of have this delay mindset or this delay up front mindset, then eventually, yeah, like you said, everything just gets delayed even more and even more. And that's probably
Right.
the worst for what we're going for here.
Yes, I mean that really happens. It can feel like, oh no, it'll just be, another 6 weeks. But what happens is when you allow yourself to chase the certainty, you get to 6 weeks and maybe you still don't know because you underestimated, or maybe something else popped up, and then you say, oh, well, no, I need a few more weeks, and oh, I need a few more. When you're chasing that certainty, that can keep growing, and it's just a bad habit. There's a technique, you could say, well, okay, what do we do? How do we work with this? I can't make decision making easy. It's inherently can be challenging, but most of us know from our personal lives if there's a big decision you're trying to make, you can eliminate the dumb ideas, but sometimes pretty quickly you get to a couple of options, two or three options, and you don't really know what the best approach is. And it's not like another day of work is going to answer the question, right? You realize I don't know how to figure this out quickly. There's an important technique that I use when I get to that point. When I get to the point where I have two or three options, I've gotten rid of the bad ideas, what I think are the bad ideas, and I have two or three options left, and I really don't know which is the best one, I just push myself to make a decision. I just pick my favorite, make a decision, and then work to make your choice the right decision. So pick
Mm.
something and then move forward, working to make it actually work out. Now, that doesn't mean it will work out, right? There's no guarantees here. It's not saying there's some magic and you'll get the right answer. It's simply saying, I'm not going to know. So the best approach is to pick one and see if it works. There's really two reasons I love this technique. One is it reminds me that I can't predict the future as much as I'd like to pretend I can, right? As long as we're analyzing the options, trying to pick the best outcome, what we're really saying is that we're thinking we can predict the future. And there's only so much of that we can do. That's been my experience. I don't know about yours. But the other reason I like it is you realize, well, once I pick a path, as I start to move down it, sometimes I see things that I can do that say, well, I could have chosen this one way or another, but I'll choose it to align with the decision that I made, right? I can start to take other actions that align with the choice I made versus the other options, and it makes it more likely to work out. As I move forward, what it amounts to is now I'm looking at real problems and real things that happen instead of trying to analyze hypothetical issues, hypothetical problems when I'm trying to make the decision. I don't know what to do with hypothetical problems, but I do know how to address real problems. And again, maybe I can't solve it, but it turns out there's more than you realize that can be done.
Absolutely. I think a few things stood out from that. I think it could be tricky, right? This idea of making your decision the right decision, sort of it feels biased. It feels sort of like you're picking the best decision. But when I think about it, less from an academic viewpoint and more from just like a life viewpoint, it feels like clarity through action, right? Contentment in your decision or learning as a process, right? And so I think taking sort of a learning approach of like, I need to make a decision. There are people that are relying on me. I
Mm-hmm.
got to move forward. I'm going to see what clues come about as I move along on this path, and then work my best to fit those with the decision that I've made. And if not, to continue reevaluating, but not to reevaluate so much that I turn around and then try to get certainty again. Because I'm with you, I've never been able to predict the future. So if anybody listening has been able to, then please let us know. That would be
We'd
great.
love to hear from them. Yeah.
Absolutely. But one thing that stuck out to me from what you were saying is sort of in the academic space, if I delay my work for certainty, the only person who really gets affected is me.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm gonna search for certainty potentially because if it gets delayed 6 months, that's just the PhD, that's just grad school, that's just academia. It's just how it is. It takes a long time. There's no deadline. I don't have a deadline at least. My PhD could be 7 years.
Mm-hmm.
But in industry, it seems like from what you're telling me, there are just so many other players and so many other people relying on you. It's almost like, I guess, in a soccer game, if you were to have a ball right at your feet and you never kick it, you guys are never going to score a goal. You know what I mean? So I think that's something
Yeah.
that's been on my mind as you've been speaking. The need for speed is not just for you, it's for other people who are relying on you, not just your customers, but also your team.
Absolutely. That's a great analogy. I like to say, as a physicist, every physicist would love to, predict how to kick a soccer, a football, and get a goal. But of course, that's not how you win the game because you can't take that kind of time. And it is all about your teammates. In industry, whatever you're doing somehow fits into a complex framework that all needs to move forward together. And if you're late, it delays other people. So But it is interesting in an academic setting. Yeah, I also didn't have any deadline, and so I felt I could take as long as I needed. Now, I will point out that's not always true in a lot of countries, European countries in particular. Many times PhDs have contracts for 3 or 4 years, and that does impose a deadline. So it becomes important for them, even in a graduate setting. But that makes it important to think about, well, it's not only important in industry, but how can we start to practice here? This is something we like to talk about in this series, right? Where can we think of an opportunity where we can start to practice this now? If I think back to when I was working on my PhD, there were actually a couple times where I did make a decision quickly and move forward without all the analysis I might have needed. It didn't occur to me at the time, but for example, for my PhD, one of the projects I did, I built an atom interferometer, and it's not important what that is. It's actually kind of the inverse of if anyone made an interferometer using a laser and mirrors and beam splitter. So this flips it on its head. It's demonstrating the wave nature of matter. But the point is, my experimental setup, I had to build this on my own. There was no, you don't buy this off the shelf. And there were so many options about how do I make this really stable? The mechanical stability was important. I thought, oof, there was one voice in my head saying I could do a lot of analysis and come up with the most stable system that would be perfect and really, give me great results. And I just thought, I don't even know where that would end. I'm not willing to wait that long. I'm just going to try something. I'm just going to throw something together and hopefully it will work. And that's what I did. So that was a situation where I realized I actually picked something and started moving forward.
That's so cool. I have no idea what a interferometer, am I saying?
Interferometer, yes.
Interferometer? I have no idea what that is, but I look forward to you explaining maybe off the call here. But I think that is such a cool representation of ways in which PhDs can start now. I think, like I
Mhm.
had mentioned, there are many instances where we're not necessarily encouraged to move forward with speed. We are encouraged to move forward with certainty. And I think I have found personally in my own journey that in order to sort of make the progress or get the momentum going, putting one foot in front of the other and continuing even when you're uncertain is sort of the best way to move forward. I think something that is sort of maybe tangential to this idea of speed is working on things in parallel. So I know in my own work, I work with mice, and to have an experiment ready to go, it takes about 2 months, maybe even more. And so if I don't start moving forward on the other experiments, right, several experiments at once, I'm going to be waiting 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 months till the data from the first experiment is ready, and I'm certain to move forward with the next, and we would never get anything done. This would just take forever. So I think right now, something at least in my personal journey, I think yours represents it well, is sort of moving forward and trying your best to kind of take as much information as you have and make a decision. And that's a habit that folks can start building right now.
Yes, that's exactly it. I think your example is probably a good one. I know what a mouse is, but I don't understand the details of that on your side. But if there was any risk in moving forward with all those in parallel, if you sensed any risk, then that is a good example. That you decided to take that risk, and it allows you to move forward more quickly. Probably works out well. If it doesn't, well, okay, then you fix something about it and you move forward even more intelligently.
Absolutely. I think I'm going to start. I'm inspired from this call to every time I feel like I'm taking a risk or to feel discomfort. Maybe I should lean into that a little bit. Maybe just move forward a bit and see, like you said, what am I learning along the way that sort of makes this the right decision? Or maybe what am I learning along the way that makes another decision more of the right decision? And eventually just I can move back to that or reevaluate as we go. So I
Yeah.
think maybe I'm a little bit more excited to feel uncomfortable. I didn't think I would say that.
No, that's good. I mean, that discomfort is part of making progress, right? If we're too comfortable, we're not really making the progress we need to. So here's a perspective, maybe to kind of wrap this up, and we can move on to, what's the action. Here's a mindset shift. We talk about this being a mindset shift. The way I like to think of it is in academia, we tend to have this approach that, well, I'm not certain, so let's keep looking until we are certain. But in industry, the approach that is valued, and I've I've been told this by many managers who wish their PhDs would shift to this. It's more of a, I'm not certain, so let's try something and see if it works or not. And it's okay if it doesn't work because we learned something that didn't work and we move forward more intelligently. That's a way
Mm.
you might be able to describe that whole thing.
I like that a lot. And I really like that differentiation. I think that helps sort of parse out all the of what we've been saying these
Yeah.
past few minutes here. That's something that, folks could just repeat in their head. I'm not certain, so I'm going to try something. And that's a great way to start now. So I love that. I love that. Do we want to hop into the action for the week?
Yeah. So the action for this week is to identify 3 times this week, if you can, when you find yourself with a decision. It doesn't have to be a huge decision. You might even want to start with something simpler, but just think about when you are faced with a decision, something where you aren't certain, and consider how you might just pick one option. And then, more importantly, how can you make that choice the right answer? Now, this isn't related to something about data. Data speaks for itself. That tells us are we right or not, but it could be a configuration, it could be a process for moving forward, something where we have an option. We don't know what the right response, what the right answer is. So pick something and then think about, now that I've picked it, how can I make this? Use the path analogy. I think it's a great one, like a journey. I've started down a journey. I don't really know what lies ahead, but what can I do to make this a good journey? What can I do to make this work out well? Because again, we're not looking for perfect answers in everything.
For anybody who felt a little bit of nervousness as we've discussed the action for the week, just know I'm right there with you. I think making decisions quickly, especially as an academic, and especially when it takes time and resources, is a bit scary.
Mhm.
But I think this is something I'm going to try personally in my own academic journey, and I hope others will do the same. So thank you for that, Dave. And this has been lovely. So next week, we're going to talk about independence versus interaction. So we alluded to it a little bit in this conversation, the team you work with in industry versus sort of the independence you might have in your academic setting. So academia teaches us to be more independent and be more self-sufficient, but maybe that doesn't work well in industry. So everything is teamwork there, and we'll get into that. So stay tuned. And Dave, this was lovely. Thank you so much.
Excellent. Looking forward to the next one.